Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Society of New Haven. I'm Peggy Ray. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm very happy to welcome you here today. As you probably know, I'm one of the stewardship team members, and we're winding down our campaign. There will be a big celebration next week of the generosity that you all have shown in pledging. After the service, come join us for the celebration at a soup luncheon and cake in the social hall. And if you haven't pledged already, please do pledge. These past several weeks, you've heard from several USNH members about the reasons for their supporting USNH. We all have different reasons, and I know that you've heard sometimes it's Sunday school, sometimes it's just personal, the personal feeling of being at home here that have kept people supporting it. Today, we're going to hear from Joni Messner, who, as most of you know, has had her fingers in many different things at USNH over the years, most recently as the well-known Dr. Competent. Joni.
Good morning. My name's Joni Messner. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I've been a member of USNH along with my husband Dan since our kids were 6 and 8. Now they're 23 and 25. So some quick math there, a little bit less than 20 years, but more than 15. I think my story of why we came to USNH is very similar to a lot of yours. Our kids were starting to ask questions that we couldn't answer. Adele had a friend who was leading a prayer group at recess, and she wanted to know about this Jesus guy. Was he like Santa Claus? He must be magic if he could come back from the dead. So here we are. Our kids are now grown up, sort of, and off on their own adventures, and we are still here at USNH. Why is this? Why are we pledging money to this place even after we have no longer need for the answers about this Jesus guy? Well, I love these testimonials. I find them very relatable, and I thought maybe we could make this one a community testimonial with a little bit of interactiveness. So if you could please indulge me, I'd like to take an informal survey with a show of hands. How many of you have ever had the experience of walking into the social hall with a teeny weeny bit of dread? Oh, wow, more than I thought. And then you had a conversation with someone that made you laugh or taught you something or made you feel like you were really happy you came. So, how many of you have ever purchased an obscene amount of baked goods at the chocolate auction? And you justified it, even though you were on a diet, you were trying to get healthy, and you thought, this is for a good cause, and I can freeze a lot of this. Yeah. How many of you have ever been roped into being in a skit and sacrificed your dignity for this beloved community? And you thought, wow, what a bunch of goofballs. Beloved goofballs. Who has ever written a card to somebody at USNH? Have you ever received a card from someone at USNH that made you feel seen or appreciated, and it acknowledged something you were going through, and it made you feel like you're not in this alone? How many of you have ever given or received a hug at USNH? Hugs are coming back, I think. How many of you have ever had the experience of being nudged or cajoled or arm twisted into serving on a committee or a task force or a project? And you felt like, I don't have time for this. This isn't really my bag. And then you ended up having a great experience. And you interacted with people on a deeper level. You learned something. You did something, you contributed to something worthwhile. And it was deeply satisfying. Yep. Me too. Have you ever come here on a Sunday, a regular Sunday, nothing special, and found yourself unexpectedly with tears in your eyes, sometimes even leaking out because of something that was said from the pulpit, or some music, something Bill played? or a particular hymn, something the choir sang, and you came here thinking, this is a regular Sunday, I'm here to see some nice people, and all of a sudden you've been touched or transported or communed with something on the order of the divine that was totally unexpected. I have. So these are some of the reasons why I support USNH financially. And if you can relate to any of what I'm saying, and I think you can, I encourage you to pledge generously. This is pretty special, what we have here. Thank you.
Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Society of New Haven. My name is Gwen Hughes Severance, and I will be your worship associate today, along with David Jones. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Whether you are here for the first time or have been attending for years, whether you are here in person or virtually on Zoom or YouTube, you are most welcome. Visitors who wish to learn more about USNH, please join us in the social hall after the service. Have a cup of coffee or tea, and please stop by the welcome table in the right-hand corner of the social hall. And now for a few words from our sponsor with announcements. Although masks are optional in our sanctuary, we want to honor those who choose to wear masks. There are signs on the first 5 rows on the piano side, right here, of the sanctuary. These are set aside for mask wearers. If you choose to sit there, please put a mask on. The Adult RE Committee is holding a sharing and reflection circle today in room 208 at 12:15. All are welcome. And the next in-person soup lunch at USNH is this coming Sunday, April 2nd. And the Sunday morning team is sponsoring it and would appreciate people donating soup, bread, butter, but no desserts at this time, because the special dessert will be provided by the stewardship team. All right. Unitarian Universalism holds that the great good comes from wide diversity. So whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your heritage, and from wherever your beliefs spring, we are pleased that you are here. Now, come let us be together for a while. The poet Nikki Giovanni recalled, "The reason Miss Delaney was my favorite teacher, not just my favorite English teacher, is that she would let me read any book I wanted and would allow me to report on it. I always loved English because whatever human beings are, we are storytellers. It is our stories that give a light to the future. When I went to college, I became a history major because history is such a wonderful story of who we think we are. English is much more a story of who we really are." It was, after all, Miss Delaney who introduced the class to "My candle burns at both ends. It will not last the night. But ah, my foes, and oh, my friends, it gives a lovely light." And I thought, yes, poetry is the main line, English is the train. So as you settle in, please silence your cell phones and take a deep breath. Let us light the chalice and celebrate the value and gifts of mentorship with musical pieces and remembrances inspired by mentors. Our chalice lighting is we seek our place in the world and the answers to our heart's deep questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. May the light of our chalice remind us that this is a community of warmth, of wisdom, and welcoming of multiple truths. You're going to speak, right?
Good morning. My name is Elsa Arard, and my pronouns are she and her. The first time I met Jesse, which was almost 5 years ago, I got to know him as my RE teacher. Over the years, our bond has grown to more than just teacher and student, but friend and friend. I'm only 12, so how big could my entourage be? I'm not sure, but I know that Jesse would be the first person in line. I know I'm speaking for many people when I say you're great, Jesse, for being there to give encouragement, advice, or just a really good story to anyone who needs it. Thank you.
Oh dear. When I arrived in the summer of 1995 to Jodhpur, India, I found my way through the Mehrangarh fort where I was staying, and it turned out that the quarters that had been set aside for my study group for the 7 months that we were going to be there were the Queen's quarters, or the Maharani's quarters, in this old 15th century fort. And so if you go over to the left of the gentleman in the green, you got back to where my room was. And right out, sitting, on that, at that spot was this man. And he spent every day about 9-10 hours a day playing the bamboo bansuri. Over the months, as my Rajasthani and my Hindi got a little bit better, I began to have conversations with this man, and I learned that his name was Sher Singh Rathore. And Sher Singh is actually two different words. They both mean lion. He had been in the Air Force, the Indian Air Force, and since he got out of the Air Force, he had picked up this flute and learned how to play it. And he had no students. And in his family and in his belief, it was a real shame to be a musician and to not have a student. So one day as I was coming by, he asked me to sit down on this little cushion called a gadi, and he handed me one of these flutes. And before I knew it, I was his student. I don't think there was ever an ask. There was never a conversation about this. It just kind of happened. And he started showing me things to do, and we didn't have a lot of language in common, but I really learned the word nahi, 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 not like that. Once we got to a point where we could have conversations with each other, our conversations would go a little bit like this message for all. He'd show me something, I'd do my best to try to mimic, play the few notes that he had, and then we'd have a little bit of a conversation, and he gave me some great advice. He said, if you have chaos in your life, there are 3 things you can do. 1, take a freezing cold shower every morning. That will awaken your senses and keep you alert all day. I believe I've taken 1 since then. But I come back to that because he was absolutely, to use a phrase that my kindergarten teacher used, awake, alert, alive, enthusiastic, all day long. Second thing that he told me was, above all else, family, then music. And the third thing was, treat your life the way you treat one of these flutes. It's so easily broken or crushed, but beauty will come out of it depending on what you put into it. So I give thanks today to Sher Singh Rathore and to all mentors everywhere. Would you at this time please rise and join me in singing hymn number 57, Rise as You Are Able, and the children can head with me out to their classes. I was tempted to play them out like the Pied Piper, but no, I'm not going to do that. Hymn 57, All Beautiful, the March of Days.
Good morning. My name is David Jones. My pronouns are he, him, and his. In this spiritual community, we remind ourselves each week that joy and woe are woven fine. Some of us bear burdens made lighter as others help us carry it. Some of us hold joys that shine more brightly as others reflect our delight. In joys today, John Manning's birthday was last week, and he is retiring next week. Where are you, John? All right, there he is. All right, retiring next week. Okay. So you can be here full time to help after that, John. That's great. Okay. Secondly, we have a joy and a sorrow. Amy Cotton Bogish and family give thanks for the loving kindness, postcards, prayers, meals, and other support they are receiving from the USNH community. On March 3rd, Emma Bo Bogish was arrested while protesting peacefully in Atlanta, Georgia. Bo was held without bond and without in-person visitation for 3 weeks in deplorable conditions in DeKalb County Jail. Bo was finally released on bond late Thursday night and has been reunited with close family and friends. The family requests continued prayers and support as Bo heals from the multiple traumas suffered and faces what seems like an insurmountable fight against the state's outrageous charge of domestic terrorism. Let us have a moment of silence to contemplate these and other joys and sorrows unspoken among us. Thank you.
When I was 13, my family started going to Cape Cod for summer vacations. Although it was beautiful, I was lonely and unhappy. I didn't know any other kids my age, and there wasn't much to do. The following summer, everything changed. My family went back to the Cape, and I fell in love. Not with a boy, and not with a girl. No, I fell in love with a boat and with sailing. I took sailing lessons from Dave Hovey, the champion skipper of the Stage Harbor Yacht Club, and I thought he was a god. Not because he was a senior at Princeton and on the football team, not because he was handsome and sexy, which he was, but because he knew everything about sailing, sailboats, and small boat racing. And he wanted to share all of that with me, a nobody. Dave taught me about the boat, the sails, the tiller and the rudder, the halyards and sheets, and how everything worked together to create the most efficient and beautiful movement through the water. Read the water. Read the wind, he would say, and then plot your course. Read the water, read the wind. Know the tide, look for the currents and back eddies. Check wind speed and direction. Put telltales on your halyards. Look for slack surfaces. And when we began to race other boats, Dave adapted his mantra to strategy and planning. Figure out where you will cross the starting line, where the windward mark is, how you will beat to get there, and how to bring the boat home on a broad reach in the windward slot. Read the water, read the wind. Throughout my high school and college years, sailing was my passion, my fun, my doorway into a community of like-minded friends. And Dave's advice was pretty much the shape of my approach to life, to look at what's going on, to sense the mood, the vibe, the dynamics, and interactions. Whether it is teaching history to high school kids, fly fishing in a trout stream in Cape Breton, or living in relationship with others, my beloved spouse and family, my friends, my community. Read the water, read the wind. Let us hold silence together.
Hi, I'm John Watson. I am a retired, finally, public defender. I just finished my last case in October of 2022. I was a strong student in law school, and I'm pretty smart. Because I'm so bleeping certain of that last point, I can, let's be kind, not be the easiest person in the world and or teach. This talk is about two people early in my career who got stuck with that duty and managed to teach me a thing or two. The first was Morton Lewis of blessed memory, who was my supervisor when I went to the lower trial court in New Haven to handle misdemeanors and lesser felonies. Mort was a genial and charming man who got along with everybody, prosecutors, judges, clients, clerks. Clerks, by the way, are the best, most important people in the courthouse to get along with. You are better off having the presiding judge hate you than the chief clerk. You wouldn't have known it from talking to him, but Mort was a graduate of Harvard and Yale Law, or maybe it was the other way around, and a retired U.S. Army colonel, World War II vet. I, fresh out of law school, and remember, convinced I was really smart, thought the way things had been done for a while and the judge's usual opinions and rulings were almost always totally wrong and or irrelevant. Mort somehow taught me that even when I was right about that, it was not usually effective to let that opinion come out by word or attitude. Mort later told me that he carried bail money for me and another young lawyer in his pocket for a year or so. He taught me his lessons before he had to bail me out. When I left that office, I transferred to the appellate office of the statewide public defender system. My supervisor there was Joette Katz, who later became a judge, then a justice of the Connecticut Supreme Court, and then commissioner of the Department of Children and Youth Services. She did not have any hesitation to take on some ugly jobs. She was, for example, on the scene and making decisions about when and how to notify parents and the media after the Newtown school shooting. As I said, she doesn't shrink from horrifyingly difficult duty. I saw her at an event about 10 days after she left the Supreme Court to take the Commissioner of Children and Youth Services. I walked up to her and said, "Oh, it's the dumbest woman in Connecticut." Her husband, who was standing next to her, laughed so hard that I thought he was going to hurt himself. Joette personally is a warm, smart, wonderful person and a tough-talking, funny, New York street-smart package. She keeps a picture of herself meeting Hulk Hogan in her office. Joette taught me a lot of stuff. How do you do thorough legal research in limited time? How to shape an argument, how to finish and get the brief to the printer in the nick of time, then drive it through a snowstorm to Hartford. You know, important practical stuff. But she also taught me stuff about working with people. That office was the intellectual cherry on top of the Connecticut criminal justice world, though the prosecutors have a corresponding office with similar pretensions. In some abstract way, Joette may not have been the smartest person in that office. There were these two geniuses whose tested IQ may well have exceeded hers. Note here that I do not include myself in that pair. But her interpersonal skills, her practical judgment and strategic sense completely dwarfed theirs and mine. She managed that office of self-regarding legal eagles, all the while sitting on every significant legal advisory panel in the state and writing her share of the cases. Among the most important things I learned from her were, one, that there is no substitute for relentless work, not even brilliance, and two, that how an issue is presented to the court, or any group, say this one, is never less important than the substance. I will close with the fact that both Mort and Joette helped me learn that being a lawyer, even a fierce advocate, should never be thought inconsistent with being a decent person.
I'm Linda Mehta. Justine Cullinan, managing editor of the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences, managed a workplace that was outstanding in its support of staff and the quality and quantity of its output. Bill Boland, our executive editor, had already become a legend because his staff had resigned en masse when he ran afoul of the upper management and was threatened with termination. Luckily, he was still there when I joined the department. Bill mentored many, including Justine, but Justine was my mentor in nearly all aspects of my life. I feel her pouring out of my fingers as I type. A turn of phrase, a word's origins, a song's lilt, a sweater's pattern, all evoke her. Justine Cullinan was a rarity who embraced many things, an Irish American who appreciated the best of the British, especially their literature, a lifelong New Yorker who groused on St. Patrick's Day about how people should be required to take at least one course on Irish language and culture before they slapped on their green plastic hats and drank their green beer. She was a polymath, an English major, a music lover, and an editor who gained an insider-level understanding of science. She taught me that an editor first served the readers. Her mentoring was delivered with embellishments about how the grammatical rule or syntactical style I was mishandling could aid in clarifying communication or in adding grace. Her vocabulary was extensive, and she didn't dumb it down in writing or speech, but she was always happy to explain. She introduced me to literature that I would never have stumbled across or challenged myself with without her endorsement of its worth. I had always been a reader, but she immeasurably elevated the depth and breadth of my reading and my appreciation of the author's art. I grew up in a family in which knowing things was highly valued. Justine absolutely valued knowing and getting the facts right, but also instinctively grasped the complexities of truths beyond grounded facts. She knew her way around philosophical literature and had an intellectual understanding of her own Catholicism and other religious teachings that widened my own understanding. I kept returning to that seemingly boundless well. After I left the New York Academy of Sciences, she helped me, usually with humor, sometimes with outrage, deal with a workplace that brought her to mind her comment, "I've seen so much dopiness mixed with ignorance and self-confidence, think Dunning-Kruger syndrome, that it makes my teeth hurt." She bolstered my confidence and reassured me that my take on things was on target. When I asked her how best to clear up a miscommunication between my boss and a book distributor, she weighed in with, "The Chinese-speaking staff at McGraw-Hill in Singapore have two things to deal with: their own grasp of a second language, quite good, and your CEO's lack of grasp on his first." I wish I could tell her about the consultant who eagerly told me how he was helping Wiley monetize ever smaller snippets of content, to the point that I began to wonder whether we'd all end up having to pay Wiley for every and the. I both miss her profoundly and know she's part of me. Much of what I do is infused with her spirit, her shared wisdom, and her wit. We sometimes laughed so much our faces hurt. She was one of the most insightful, wise, and yet self-effacing persons I've ever known. She tried to keep her light under a bushel, but that light just couldn't help beaming out. I'm grateful that I had the luck to meet her, the sense to listen to what she had to offer, and the ability to retain as much of it as I did.
Every week, we lift up the spiritual value of generosity by taking an offering for the ministries of this congregation. Our community continues, and the need for ongoing support continues as well. For those here in the sanctuary, you can make donations on your way out at the end of the service. And you can also, those that are online or with us can navigate to the usnh.org website and make a donation. Of course, donations can also be sent by U.S. mail to the Unitarian Society of New Haven, 700 Hartford Turnpike, Hamden, Connecticut, 06517. And there is now a QR code in the order of service. Simply point your smartphone camera at it to make a donation. What a wonderful world. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Hello again. I'm Joni Messner still, and my pronouns are still she, her, hers. I don't know how this happened. I'm sorry. I am a nurse midwife, as many of you know. I feel very lucky to have found a calling where I get to do what I love, and I also get to be paid for it. The hours are not always great because babies like to come in the middle of the night. But fortunately, I am only on call every 8th day for 24 hours. And the other days I get to sleep in my own bed at night and see patients during the week in the office. When I was a student midwife in Ohio, I was lucky to be assigned a preceptor named Nazneen Khan. Formerly Christine, Naz was a British midwife who married a Muslim man, and as tradition requires, took a Muslim name. And she trained during the Call the Midwife, the early days of the Call the Midwife era. She was an expert veteran midwife who was getting toward retirement age, and I considered myself lucky to have her as a student, possibly her last. As I got to know her, or I was her student, as I got to know her, I learned that she was getting tired of taking students. It was such a hassle when they knew nothing, and she had to teach them everything. Luckily, she took a liking to me and kept me on as her student through each phase of my midwifery training. When I graduated from midwifery school, she helped get me hired into her group, and we became friends and colleagues. She was also my midwife and became family when she delivered my own babies, Adele, and 2 years later, Henry. It was an ideal mentor-student relationship in many ways. In some ways, not so much. She was an experienced midwife on a level where her knowledge seemed to be in her bones. She was not very good at articulating why she did things certain ways. When I would be hesitating or trying to puzzle something out about a patient, a cervical exam, a labor course, or how to put somebody's vagina back together after a birth, Naz would say, "Oh, come on, Joni, it's not rocket science." She would say this with affection and impatience. To her, midwifery was kind of like plumbing or car mechanics. To me, her midwifery knowledge was profound and mystical and magical. But Naz had little time for my endless questions. When I got into my head and worried about the details, the management plans, the steps involved in certain hand skills, she would get impatient. She once told me you could train a monkey to deliver babies. I guess I was the monkey. I loved Naz. Her mentoring style was no nonsense. There was no place for angst or drama. Her job and mine was to safely shepherd a family through childbirth, to anticipate and mitigate problems, to curtail drama before it began. I learned from Naz that a good midwife is grounded and clear-eyed and funny and compassionate. I learned the critical nuts and bolts about midwifery and how not to be full of myself or stuck in my own head. Now, 30 years later, I'm the expert magical midwife. But if ever I'm struggling or spinning my wheels about something, I'll hear Naz's voice in my head. "Oh, come on, Joni, it's not rocket science."
Good morning. My name is Paul Trotta, and for those of you who have seen this pile of books I was carrying, please don't run for the exits. I'm not going to read from them. I'm not going to read any of them. Instead, I'm going to talk about a person who was very dear to me. Her name was Ruth Myers, and she worked at New Haven Public Library after retiring as an English professor from Southern Connecticut State University, or State College as it was then. I was a library student and assigned to work with Ruth as a library student's form of student teaching. Ruth was kind of an ambassador without portfolio at the library. almost the assistant librarian, but didn't have that title. And we did a lot of interesting things together. One of the first things she told me was that while I would be with her most of the time, there were some occasions in which she would have to be at a private meeting and I would not be allowed. And hence came my first test. She said, well, I'm gone. Her office was in a large room that was also used for book donations. She said, there's all these books here, and there must have been a couple of thousand. While you're here, I want you to go through and separate them into piles. Books that the library should keep, books that the library should not keep, and books that you're undecided about. And also, if there are any that need repair, put those aside. And it's very, very important for those books that you've put aside that we go and see Mary, who does all the book repair work. Well, I went to work on sorting the books out, realizing that it was going to be a test of my knowledge, and kind of curious about what was happening with Mary and why it was so important. So every week or so, I would ask her, when are we going to go and see Mary? And she said, oh, not yet, we're not ready. I would ask her a few days later, still the same answer, but she would always say, it's very, very important, please remind me. And then one day, we finally got to see Mary. Mary was also an older woman in charge of repairing books. She worked by herself. It was kind of a lonely job. And when we walked in, Mary was kind of forlorn, not all that happy. But Ruth walked up to her and she showed her a book. And you can see this book, perhaps not all of you can see it, but the book is in need of repair. And Ruth would go up to Mary and say, oh, this is a lovely book. We've tried to fix it once, and the tape is all come off. What can we do with it, Mary? And Mary looked at the book and said, oh, this is a nice book. And you know what we should do? We should rebind it. We've tried to repair it, let's rebind it. And then Mary picked up a book and said, this is what happens when you rebind a book. It comes out, it's probably better than new. And then we went on to another book. And this was a brand new book that somehow or other had been donated. And Ruth said, what should we do with this? And Mary would say, well, you know, with paperbacks, Scotch has just come out with a brand new tape. It won't yellow. And we can put some of that tape on the outside, and we can put some of that on the inside cover. And that will make the book last a lot longer. And while all this was going on, Mary's spirits were brightening. She knew that someone in the library respected what she was doing. And that lesson, I hope, has stayed through with me for a long time, that every person's work has dignity and every person should be treated with dignity. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Barbara Orrick. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. My profession is psychiatry. Thank you for inviting me to honor my mentor, Florence Pat Hasseltine, PhD, MD, and so on. She's 10 years older than I am. By temperament and also by necessity, she was able to figure out how to claim her place beside the men around her, many of whom were, shall we say, unenlightened. Florence graduated from UC Berkeley, MIT, Einstein College of Medicine. She trained at Penn and Harvard, and then she established Yale's embryology laboratory. And then she went to the National Institutes of Health to head the Center for Population Research, and so on. In 1974, I was part of a feminist health collective in Boston. We hired Florence to do well woman care, a woman gynecologist. We needed women gynecologists, and I decided to become one. I'd visit her at the lab in the evening where she would multitask, dispensing wisdom while humorously recounting her experiences with her mostly male colleagues as she looked into her microscope and counted cells with a clicker. She described spending the night in the doctor's, the men's, on-call room. A male colleague asked her, just teasing, what she would do if, when, one of them climbed into bed with her. She responded that she would bite off the first presenting part, and so on. Years later, Florence scheduled her children's birth by C-sections. She knew that her choice to do that would be challenged, but her well-known male obstetrician's decision would not, and so on. What's it like to be a surgeon? It's really, really time and energy consuming. You have to love surgery more than you love sex, she advised. Pursuing a professional career was relentless, especially with few or no role models. Florence didn't want to be a role model. She was a mentor. I'm not sure that she set out to change the world, but she loved her work, and she has changed the world. The fight for women's equity drove me into medicine. As I looked ahead to a career doing battle with my colleagues on behalf of my patients, I had to admit that I did not love the battle more than I loved sex. In my job as a psychiatrist, my patients and I join in the battle against their psychiatric disorders. My mentor knew that I wanted to be like her, that I can't be like her, and yet I am like her. Thank you, Dr. Hasseltine.
My name is Sharon McBlain, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I invite you to rise in body, in spirit, and in all the ways that we do, and join me in singing hymn number 1012 from the Teal hymnal, When I Am Frightened.
When I'm uncertain,
Please join me in the words we use to extinguish the chalice, which you'll find in your order of service or in the chat on the live stream. Together, let us say, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Go mindful of paths worn by earlier travelers who have stopped to give you directions. Go attentive to paths worn and stories shared by pilgrims well-worn and storyful. Go anticipating moments when others will ask you, which way is the best way and why? What directions will you give? What stories will you share? Go expectantly, go graciously. Amen. Thank you, Bill.